Real people, real confessions, the stories you weren't supposed to hear. Welcome to Beyond Reddit Stories. If I told you that my entire life was built on a lie, would you believe me? It sounds like the kind of thing people say when they want attention or when they're trying to be dramatic. But I'm not exaggerating. I'm talking about something real. Something you'd never expect to happen to someone like me. I recently discovered that the man I grew up calling my father, the person I loved, admired, and tried to model my life after was never supposed to grow up in my family at all. He was switched at birth, literally swapped with another baby in the hospital. I wish I was making that up. I wish this was some poorly written soap opera, but it's not. It's my real life. And the worst part? He has no idea that any of this is true. Not yet, anyway. I've been sitting on this secret for weeks, maybe months, trying to figure out what to do. Every time I look at him, I feel sick like I'm holding a grenade, and no one else knows it's about to go off. He laughs at the dinner table, tells us jokes, lives his normal life, and I'm just watching, knowing that at any moment, everything he believes about himself, about us, about family, could collapse. I keep asking myself, how much does a person's identity depend on blood, on birth? What really makes someone a father or a son? Is it genetics? Or is it the life we build together? Because if it's just biology, then our entire family is a fraud. But if it's love and time and memories, then maybe the truth doesn't even matter. But I know deep down it does matter. And I can't keep this secret forever. Because once I found out the truth, I couldn't unknow it. And now I'm standing here, holding this impossible truth in my hands, wondering if I tell him, am I saving him from a lie? Or am I destroying the only life he's ever known? My name is Ethan Parker. I'm 27, living in a small town just outside Boston. I work as a freelance graphic designer, which basically means I stay up late, drink too much coffee, and get paid to make things look better than they really are. My life is normal, maybe even boring. I have a small apartment filled with houseplants and old vinyl records. I see my friends on weekends. I get annoyed at traffic and occasionally forget to pay my phone bill. I'm about as average as you can get. My dad, his name is Richard Parker, is 58. He works as a mechanic at a local auto shop. He smells like motor oil half the time, but he's the kind of guy people trust. He doesn't talk much about feelings, but he'll fix a stranger's flat tire for free because it's the right thing to do. I grew up thinking that this man was the definition of integrity. My mom, Karen, is a school librarian. She's warm and patient and still makes pancakes on Sundays. We're not rich, but we're stable. We have old family photos on the walls, bad jokes at dinner, birthday traditions, nothing dramatic. Just home. If you saw us from the outside, you'd assume we were like every other middle-class American family. 3-bedroom house, dog named Milo, backyard with a broken swing set. Growing up, my dad taught me how to ride a bike, how to shave, how to stand up for myself. In my mind, that was fatherhood. He even coached my little league team when I was 10. He yelled at the umpire once, which made the whole team laugh because dad is usually calm and quiet until he's not. But even as a kid, I remember noticing small things, like how dad doesn't look like anyone else in the family. My grandparents on his side are small, fair-skinned, blue-eyed. My dad is tall, darker features, almost Mediterranean-looking. When I asked my mom about it once, she laughed and said, maybe there's a handsome mailman in the family tree. It was always a joke, until it wasn't. He was always close with his parents. Though, my grandparents adored him. Even though they were more conservative, quieter, kind of formal, my dad has this warmth they don't have. He's more expressive, more casual. Even his humor feels different. When I was younger, I thought that just meant he had a different personality. People are different, right? You don't question it. You just accept it. Until recently, our life was just that routine, safe. A little dull, but peaceful in that comforting way routine can be. We go to Sunday barbecues. We argue about politics at Thanksgiving. We exchange gifts at Christmas. I always assumed I'd grow up, get married, repeat the same life he had. Nothing unusual, nothing weird, just another regular American family. And maybe that was the scariest part, because sometimes the biggest secrets hide in the most ordinary places. It all started with something completely ordinary, my dad complaining about chest pain one weekend. He brushed it off, of course, said it was just heartburn, but my mom insisted he go get checked. And eventually he agreed to a full physical. The doctor suggested we run some genetic tests, just to be safe. Everyone's doing it now, family history, risk profiling, it's so common that nobody questions it anymore. At first, I didn't think much of it. I even joked I'd probably find out I'm related to some Viking king or something useless like that. But when the results came back, something was off. The doctor sat across from me and my dad with a confused look. He said, almost too casually, "Your blood type doesn't match what we have on file for your parents. It's probably a clerical error or an old record." My dad didn't care. But I felt this weird prickling at the back of my neck. A clerical error, it sounded harmless. But the way the doctor said it, it didn't feel harmless. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling, thinking about that one stupid sentence. Blood type doesn't match. I knew blood types can skip, sure. But something about the doctor's face felt off. So I did something crazy. I ordered a DNA kit not for me, but for him and me together. I told him it was just curiosity. "It might be fun," I said. He shrugged and said sure. My mom laughed and called me a nerd. The results took 8 weeks. 8 excruciating weeks. During that time, I tried to forget about it, tried to live normally, but every time I looked at him, I felt like I was staring at a question I didn't want to answer. Finally, the email arrived. I locked myself in my room, opened it, and felt the world tilt. The test said that my dad and I were related, but not in the way we were supposed to be. It listed him as possible relative, non-biological father, genetic distance unrelated. I remember staring at the screen, reading those words over and over: non-biological father, unrelated, non-biological, unrelated. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, entered something wrong, so I cross-checked everything, then ordered another test from a different company. While waiting for that, I started digging around old family photos, birth records, anything I could find. I even went to the town archive to pull hospital logs from the year my dad was born, 1967. The nurses back then probably didn't use computers. Everything was handwritten and messy, a total nightmare. I started comparing times of birth, hospital room numbers. I saw that 2 boys were born the same night in the same wing, 10 minutes apart. Both sets of parents had similar last names, Parker and Patton. One nurse's handwriting made them look almost the same. I felt sick. Absolute dread. It was too coincidental. The second DNA test eventually came in and it confirmed everything. 0% chance of biological relation. I read it in the car, in a grocery store parking lot, and my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't even drive. I felt like I was carrying a live bomb. My dad had no idea. My mom had no idea. And I was the only person on earth who knew that my father wasn't really my father, not by blood. I felt guilty even thinking about it. He raised me. He was there for every major moment of my life. But now I was wondering who raised him. Who was supposed to hold his hand during his first steps? Who was supposed to teach him how to ride a bike? Some other man, somewhere, who never even knew he existed. For days, I couldn't look him in the eye. We'd be sitting at dinner and he'd ask me how work was. And I'd just mumble something, trying not to break. I started avoiding him. My mom noticed. She asked if something was wrong. I lied and said I was stressed from work. Meanwhile, I started building a folder on my laptop, full of names, hospital documents, addresses that matched the second baby born that night, the other family, the Pattons. I found photos of them online. There was a man about my dad's age. His name was Daniel Patton, and he looked so much like my dad, it made my stomach flip. Same eyes, same jaw, same expression when he smiled. It was terrifying. That's when I realized this isn't just some weird historical accident. This is someone's life. His life. And I had to decide whether to rip his world apart or keep living like nothing happened. I couldn't handle carrying it alone anymore. I was barely sleeping, couldn't eat. My mind kept replaying that DNA result like a broken alarm bell. Finally, one night around midnight, I walked into the living room. Dad was sitting there watching an old baseball game rerun with a beer in his hand. I stood there shaking, and before he could ask what was wrong, I blurted it out. "Dad, I think there's something wrong with your birth records." He turned the volume down and looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I sat across from him, hands sweating, and told him everything. The blood test from the doctor, the DNA kits, the hospital records, the other family name Patton. At first, he thought I was joking. Then he got angry, really angry, not at me, but at the idea of it. He kept saying, "No, that's not possible. That doesn't make any sense." He looked betrayed, even offended. I felt horrible, like I'd stabbed him in the heart with information he never asked for. He stormed out of the room. My mom woke up from the yelling, came downstairs in her robe, and demanded to know what was going on. I told her. She went pale, sat down, started crying quietly. She kept saying, "This can't be real." For 2 days, my dad barely spoke to anyone. Then he asked if I still had the files, the DNA results, the hospital logs. I printed everything out and gave it to him. He sat alone in the kitchen for hours, just reading in silence. That night, he knocked on my bedroom door and said, in a voice I'd never heard from him before, "I want to find the truth myself." We drove together to the old hospital downtown. They barely had records from that far back. Most had been moved to regional archives. Dad was oddly calm, too calm, like he'd already detached from everything he thought he knew. We ended up tracking down an old nurse who had worked in maternity in 1967. She was in a nursing home now, barely lucid, but when she saw the 2 last names, she started crying. She told us there had been a mix-up, a chaotic night, a flood of newborns and only one ID tag machine. She said they discovered the mistake later, but by then both families had moved out of state. She kept saying she was sorry. My dad, a man who never cries, sat there with tears pouring down his face like a child. As if that wasn't enough. Her final words rattled the entire room. "You weren't the only one. There was another baby that night. Both boys were switched. 2 families. Meaning there was another man somewhere out there who grew up in the life my dad was supposed to have. And my dad grew up in his." That night, my father didn't sleep. He stayed up scrolling through the files I gave him, staring at a photograph of Daniel Patton I had printed. "That's my face," he whispered. "That's literally my face." I watched him go through stages of grief and fast-forward denial, anger, sadness, a kind of acceptance but also confusion about where to belong. Then came the biggest twist yet. The next morning, Dad told me he wanted to meet them. Not to leave us, but just to see them. I was terrified he'd walk out of our family completely, but he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "You're my son. That won't change, but I need to know where I came from." We drove 3 hours to the Patton family's address. My dad stood there at the edge of their driveway like he was about to jump off a cliff. When Daniel Patton opened the door, he froze. It was like watching 2 mirrors stare at each other. Daniel's wife stepped to the door and gasped, "Honey, he looks just like you." That moment was so painfully awkward and surreal that none of us knew what to say. My dad introduced himself and explained everything. Daniel was stunned but unbelievably calm. He invited us inside. They sat across from each other like 2 versions of the same person separated by fate. Then Daniel said something none of us expected, I think. I always felt like something was off about me too. I never looked like my siblings. I always felt like a stranger in my own home. He paused. Maybe that's because I wasn't meant to be there. We all sat there in silence, realizing that both of their lives had been reversed by a single mistake made decades ago by a tired nurse and a misprinted name. The months that followed were strange, emotional, and honestly, kind of beautiful in a way I never expected. My dad didn't abandon us or suddenly transform into a different person. If anything, he became more open, more reflective. Instead of falling apart, he decided to build something new, something bigger than himself. He started spending time with Daniel, enough that they joked about being long-lost twins, even though genetically they were more like swapped destinies than siblings. The Patton family welcomed him cautiously at first, but soon it turned into genuine connection. They showed him childhood photos, told him stories about the life he would have had. It wasn't jealousy or bitterness, it was almost like finally getting answers to a question he never knew he was allowed to ask. Meanwhile, my grandparents, the ones who raised him, were told the truth too. They were shocked, devastated even, but they insisted that he would always be their son. Blood didn't undo decades of love and sacrifice. That was one of the most powerful moments I've ever witnessed. My grandfather, an old man with shaking hands, hugging my dad and saying, "You're mine, always were, always will be." Watching all of this unfold made me rethink so many things. I used to believe family was this simple formula: parents, kids, grandparents, genetics, and last names and legal documents. But what I saw was something far more complicated, and honestly more meaningful. Family was a set of choices. Who shows up for you, who stays, who loves you even when the truth is painful. My dad could have spiraled into anger or resentment, but instead, he chose to build bridges. To forgive a mistake made long before any of us were born. He formed bonds with both families, creating a kind of blended past and future. Holidays were weird the first year. We had 2 Christmas dinners, but everyone laughed about it in the end. I started to admire him in a way I never had before. Not just as the man who raised me, but as a man who could face the truth and still choose love over bitterness. He told me one night over coffee, "Life doesn't always give you answers, Ethan, but when it does, it's our responsibility to do something good with them." And that stuck with me. Not everyone gets a chance to turn pain into something honest, something that helps others heal, but he did. In some strange way, finding out the truth didn't destroy us. It expanded us. It gave us a chance to love more people, to rewrite what family could mean. It taught me that sometimes the most unexpected, even painful, revelations can lead to something deeply human and deeply inspiring. So now I'm asking you, the person listening to this, what would you do? If you found out that someone you loved, someone who raised you, wasn't actually connected to you by blood, would you tell them? Would you go searching for the truth? Or would you bury it to protect the life you already had? Stories like mine force us to confront uncomfortable questions about identity, loyalty, and what truly makes a family. For some people, it's blood. For others, it's love. Maybe it's both. Or maybe it's something else entirely. I know my life has changed forever, but in a way, it changed for the better. It made me realize how fragile we all are and how strong we can be when we face the truth head-on. And if my dad could find the courage to embrace 2 different families and forgive decades of confusion and loss, maybe we can all learn something from that. If this story touched you or reminded you of something you've gone through, I really want to hear about it. Share it in the comments. Tell me what family means to you. Maybe your experience will help someone else the way my father's story helped me. And if you want more stories like this, real, complicated, emotional stories that make you think and feel, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. It helps more than you know, and it lets me keep telling these stories in a way that feels raw and honest. Thank you for listening, truly, and remember, sometimes the truth hurts, but sometimes it sets you free.